Today, we are talking about round 2 and 3 of the NFL Draft. My recap. I'm not going to waste any of your time.
Where Keenum's going to try to work the ball on the boundary.
Let's hop right into it with our first player, and that is Will Levis. And I think Will Levis finds himself in actually a somewhat decent landing spot for where he ended up. I mean, the Texans have been looking for a quarterback for a while now. There were rumors they were going to trade up into the first round, up higher into the second or third pick to try and grab Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. They end up getting him in the second round with a trade up there, which is a lot more cost effective for the team. We don't know if he'll ever end up getting a start. I mean, really, there is no foregone conclusion with him. The future is really wide open with Will Levis, but I think he does find himself in a spot where at least he has the potential to maybe start years down the road. We know the Titans have been looking for a quarterback for a while to move on from Ryan Tannehill, somebody they like but are not enamored with, so we'll see what happens. But Will Levis landing on the Titans, then we do have Hendon Hooker going to the Lions, and I think this is another landing spot that in the long term does make a lot of sense. I mean, we do see Jared Goff as a great quarterback in my opinion, but a pretty low ceiling quarterback, somebody who will not throw for 40 plus touchdowns on any given season, but again, a great floor. I'm not knocking Jared Goff at all, but Hendon Hooker does potentially have a chance to start here maybe 3 or 4 years from now, and even if not, he is a phenomenal backup for the team to have, a great person, somebody who maybe is a little bit less refined than you would like for his age, but at the same time, one of the best backup quarterbacks you could have at the NFL level, and I'm fine with that for the Lions, a team that are looking to make a playoff push here. So I think Hendon Hooker, a good pickup for the team. Moving on, though, I am going to be talking about wide receivers next, and the first guy I want to talk about is Jonathan Mingo. And I think Jonathan Mingo is arguably one of the biggest risers on day 2. I mean, first of all, going to the Panthers, a wide receiver room that's pretty desolate. I mean, you have DJ Chark, you have Adam Thielen, but outside of that, I mean, Terrace Marshall's not really a threat, and they do elect to draft him early on into the second round. 39th overall, he was a top 40 pick this season, and I know the wide receiver class has been a little bit weaker this year than in years past, but at the same time, you get somebody who's a special athlete. I believe he had a 9.85 on RAS. You'll see it up here. I could be totally wrong on that, but it was somewhere in the 9s. You guys can clown me down below if I'm wrong, but I also know he did run a 4.46 on the 40-yard dash, so this is somebody who is a great athlete, a plus athlete, just never really had the production you would expect from somebody who is a super great athlete. I was diving into some of his tape last night just to see a little bit more about him. And yes, he does make some special catches, but I feel he wasn't making great separation, which is something I really value in a great wide receiver, is being able to get clear separation. Anyways, that's it for Jonathan Mingo. Moving on, though, I do want to talk about Jayden Reed, and this is somebody that admittedly I had not looked much into until last night. He's somebody who really wasn't even on my radar. I had him ranked as like my 18th and 19th best wide receiver in this draft class. He ends up going 50th overall to the Packers, if I'm not mistaken, which I think is a pretty good sign, considering the Packers did just pick up Christian Watson. Now they do have Jayden Reed to slide in alongside him, which I think is pretty important because Romeo Doubs, in my opinion, not really a long-term threat to go after and steal this wide receiver 2 job. This wide receiver 2 job is more wide open than anything else. And you do now have Jordan Love, a new quarterback, stepping in. So you want to get him as many security blankets as possible. Jayden Reed is that security blanket. Somebody who I think has rose again, at least on my boards, with his draft capital last night. And I think it is a great sign, considering he went over guys like Rashee Rice, Marvin Mims, Joshua Downs, Jalin Hyatt, the likes. I mean, this is somebody who now has the draft capital to be a great wide receiver. Moving on, we do have Rashee Rice, and this is a phenomenal landing spot. I mean, you can't argue with going to the Chiefs. That is one of the best things that could possibly happen to you. I mean, you're attached to Pat Mahomes for at least the next 4 seasons, which is great, which was the hype case for Sky Moore. And this wide receiver room is absolutely desolate. I mean, you have Sky Moore, you have Kadarius Toney, you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and that's it. Rashee Rice slots in as potentially the number 1 wide receiver in this offense right away. And this is somebody who was pretty productive at SMU, having over 1,300 yards in his senior year. And yes, he did elect to stay all 4 years, which is a little bit concerning. But if you're going to the Chiefs and you're having great production at the collegiate level, I'm not really too worried. Andy Reid, yes, he has busted in the past with his offensive players. I mean, look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, look at Sky Moore. But either way, I think Rashee Rice, still a great pick, still somebody that you should be eyeing in these drafts. I could realistically see him going as 109, 110 in one quarterback leagues, but he's somebody who might even go higher, simply because of the Chiefs effect. I mean, he could go as high as the 107 now in one quarterback leagues, and I would not be surprised, although I personally probably wouldn't take him there. But either way, I did promise a shout out on my last video. So Minor King, congratulations. You found my error. Appreciate that. You're a longtime supporter, and I appreciate all the support you give me. Rooting for you this year in fantasy. Anyways, back to the video. We do have Marvin Mims going to the Broncos, and I think this is a pretty good landing spot. I mean, to me, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to trade Courtland Sutton, but I think the odds are somewhat high that they would end up trading either Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, or KJ Hamler at this point. I mean, you don't draft a wide receiver when you have one of the most crowded wide receiver rooms in the NFL if you aren't planning on trading at least one of them. Not 100% sure, but I think this is a pretty decent landing spot if Russell Wilson can get his stuff together, which there is no guarantee of. But Marvin Mims, somebody I really liked the tape of as he was coming out. I mean, somebody I was pretty excited about. Does end up finding a good landing spot, does just barely get round 2 draft capital, which I think is fine, good enough for a guy like Marvin Mims. Moving on, though, we do have Jalin Hyatt landing on my New York Giants, and I'm pretty happy about it. I think Jalin Hyatt is going to be a better NFL wide receiver than he is a fantasy wide receiver, but that doesn't mean he won't have value in this offense. I mean, this is an offense that has direly needed deep threats, and I think Daniel Jones does actually have a decently accurate arm going down the field. He just was not able to because we really had no speed. We also do bring in Darren Waller, and yes, you could argue that this is somewhat of a crowded wide receiver room, but there is no true one outside of maybe Darren Waller, even though he's a tight end. Still, he will be the one in this offense. I think Jalin Hyatt is in a pretty interesting situation. Didn't necessarily get the draft capital that we were expecting, but either way, somebody with speed to burn and somebody who had 5 touchdowns against Alabama. Pretty excited the Giants landed him, but again, I think he will be a better real-life asset than a fantasy asset, especially considering his landing spot. The Giants are a decent team. Daniel Jones only threw for 15 touchdowns last year. That is not going to sustain great fantasy success in the long term, in my opinion. Either way, let's move on to Nathaniel Dell, and I did say in my last video that I thought John Mechie was one of my biggest winners. Also, you can check out my last video somewhere up here. But either way, I did say John Mechie was one of my biggest winners so far in the draft, and that doesn't really change with Nathaniel Dell. I mean, a third-round pick coming in. Somebody who, yes, was uber productive at the collegiate level, putting up 1,300 yards each of the last 2 seasons over at Houston. I still think John Mechie will be the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and when you do have CJ Stroud, I think there will be a little bit more targets to go around in this offense. So, I am pretty excited about Nathaniel Dell simply due to the fact that he dominated so heavily. And I actually do, the more I look into it, like Nathaniel Dell, because I think that if you are very, very dominant at a smaller school, I am fine taking the chance on you. If you're not dominant at a smaller school, maybe not. A guy like Jonathan Mingo is a great example of that. He was not that dominant and went to a wide receiver room with pretty much nobody at the position, nobody getting drafted. Whereas Nathaniel Dell, nobody's getting drafted here, but he's had over 1,300 yards each of the last 2 seasons, 17 touchdowns this last season, breaks out as a true freshman. That's something I really like to see. Nathaniel Dell, somebody to watch out for, somebody who's going to be skyrocketing up my rankings. Either way, though, let's talk about the last wide receiver, and that is Josh Downs. And I think Josh Downs, a lot of people like his landing spot. Me personally, I don't. Anthony Richardson, not somebody who's going to be able to sustain high amounts of passing volume, especially early on into his career. This is a run-first offense predicated on Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. This is an offense with Michael Pittman, an established number 1 already. So I don't think Josh Downs is ever going to take the number 1. They also have Alec Pierce, a talented but young wide receiver who is vying for the number 2 role. And yes, they do draft Josh Downs, which proves maybe they don't have all the confidence in Alec Pierce, but Josh Downs, a 3rd-round pick, Alec Pierce, a 2nd-round pick. I think this is a pretty bad landing spot for Josh Downs unless he is able to overtake Michael Pittman, which I think the odds on that are pretty low, to be 100% honest with you guys. But either way, let's move on to my next position group, and that is tight ends. And I forgot to discuss them on yesterday's video. So much chaos with the draft. Either way, though, I'll talk about Dalton Kincaid for a minute. I mean, this definitely propels him to be the tight end 1 in Dynasty rookie drafts, without a doubt in my mind. I mean, he finds himself on arguably the best landing spot in all of fantasy football. And yes, they do have Dawson Knox, I know, but they operate 1 as different tight ends, and 2, you draft a tight end in the 1st round. That tight end is going to become the dominant tight end rather quickly. I know people love Dawson Knox, but I don't think Dawson Knox is all that. I don't think Dawson Knox is a great route runner. I think he had a fluky 2021 season, which propelled him into a name brand in fantasy, but not somebody who's going to be all that great. So I do love Dalton Kincaid now. I think he is the tight end 1 without a doubt in my mind. Moving on, though, The number 2 tight end drafted was Sam Laporta, which was, again, a little bit of a surprise. We did think Michael Mayer probably would have been the tight end too. But either way, the Lions make yet another reach, pick up Sam Laporta. And this, I think, a pretty good pickup for the Lions. Sam Laporta, an Iowa player who did have pretty good receiving work, but he's also going to be great at blocking. I mean, wasn't really all that used in the touchdown department, but I think the Lions are trying to bolster their O-line any way they can. Get more tight ends, especially after they let go of TJ Hawkinson. Dumb move, they didn't want to pay him, whatever. Either way, though, I think Sam Laporta, honestly, a pretty good pickup for the Lions. I would have preferred Michael Mayer, who I'm going to talk about now. Either way, though, Sam Laporta, I think an interesting pickup. Somebody who should be on the radar, should be a mid-second round pick. And actually, one more thing on Sam Laporta. This is somebody that Joel Klatt, somebody I respect and look up to a ton, loves. So I think Sam Laporta, somebody that now with this draft capital is coming more and more on my radar. Next, we got Michael Mayer. And I think Michael Mayer, a great tight end, you know exactly what you're getting. Well, he may not be the athlete that you would expect. He is very comparable to a guy like Jason Witten, and I think the Raiders landing him is a pretty good landing spot. I mean, we've seen what they were able to do with Darren Waller. And yes, Darren Waller is a more athletic tight end, but either way, this is a team that knows how to get the most production out of the tight end position. And so, I like the landing spot for Michael Mayer. Moving on, we got one last tight end. It is Luke Musgrave going to the Green Bay Packers. And I think this is another good landing spot. I mean, we've seen the above average touchdown rates of these tight ends in this Green Bay offense. And I think it's a fine pickup. Somebody who is now on my radar, probably in the late second, early third round. A lot of it hinges on the fact of if we expect Jordan Love to be a good quarterback or not. I personally have high hopes for him, but realistically, we just don't know right about now, so it is a risky pickup. That's why he probably is more of a late second, early third round Dynasty rookie tight end, maybe even middle of the third round, honestly. I'm not willing to take my chances on him right now. I think generally, this is just a word of advice, totally separate. It is almost never worth it to go out and draft these tight ends in their first year. I mean, rarely, exceedingly rarely, do tight ends break out in their rookie season. I mean, only 2 tight ends ever have had over 900 yards in their rookie season. Those 2 were Kyle Pitts and Mike Ditka. Anomalies among anomalies. Not going to happen for most of these tight ends. And that's why I advise people to not draft rookie tight ends. Even though the situation of Dalton Kincaid looks great, I think 9 times out of 10, it's a risky situation that I do not advise investing into. I would personally rather take running backs, rather take wide receivers with those picks. Before I start with my last position group, just wanted to say, if you're still watching the video, please go down and give this video a like. I'm answering every single comment if you guys have any questions about the draft, dynasty, trades, anything. Please let me know down below and subscribe to the channel. It is the #1 way to support me. It's totally free, and you can always change your mind later. With that, though, let's talk about my last position group, and that starts with Zach Charbonnet, somebody whose value was eradicated during the draft. I mean, this is somebody who is touted as the unanimous RB3 in Dynasty rookie drafts, now probably falling to maybe not even be a first-round pick in Dynasty rookie drafts anymore. I mean, realistically, I would rather have Achane. I would probably rather have Tyjae Spears. I hate to say it, because Zach Charbonnet, I think, is the most talented out of these guys. But the situation he finds himself in is among the worst. He lands on the Seahawks with Ken Walker, somebody who had an absolutely dominant rookie season. And while I think the main reason they did want to draft Zach Charbonnet is due to the pass catching abilities, if you're splitting work between Ken Walker taking all the rushing and Zach Charbonnet all the passing, and then they split goal line work, this is going to be a terrible situation for both running backs. I think Ken Walker finds himself as a must-avoid running back depending on where his ADP lands, and same thing with Zach Charbonnet. Depending on where he is in drafts, I can't advise taking him realistically at all. It stinks because I do love both these players. I mean, both these guys are some people I was extremely high on, but Pete Carroll loves to ruin fantasy players' days. Next, we got Tyjae Spears, and it's not hard to see why Tyjae Spears is in an interesting spot. I mean, the only other running back listed on their depth chart right now is Hassan Haskins. Not only that, Derrick Henry is a 29-year-old running back, and while it's nice to think that Derrick Henry will continue as one of the best running backs in football for forever, that is simply just not true. He's 29 years old, probably has a year or 2 left of relevant fantasy football, and then after that, this could easily be Tyjae Spears' job in the long term. While this offense is not great, they do go out and draft Peter Skoronski early on in the first round, which is a good sign to bolster their O-line for the long term. And we know that Mike Vrabel knows how to use running backs and knows how to make them as productive as possible. So I actually really like the landing spot for Tyjae Spears. He probably does find himself as my running back 4 in Dynasty rookie drafts now. We'll have to see. I'll have to do a little bit more deep dive onto it, but I think instant reaction, Tyjae Spears probably is the RB4. Moving on now to the RB3, somebody who did go a little bit later, and this is somebody who I was pretty low on during the draft process, during things like the combine. And it's not hard to see why, but I think he finds himself in the best possible landing spot for him, and that is Devon Achane. And I think Achane finds himself in by far the best landing spot you could possibly ask for. I mean, in these Shanahanian type of offenses, they value speed over everything else. I mean, look at Raheem Mostert, look at Jeff Wilson. What do these two backs have in common? They are very fast. Both these guys, though, are either old or undrafted. Raheem Mostert's going to be 31 this NFL season. Jeff Wilson, 28 years old and an undrafted guy. Achane fits what they want to do to a T, and that is speed. First of all, you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, two of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL on the outside. Then you add Achane, a 4.32, legitimate track star level speed, almost borderline Olympian level speed to your offense. Well, I don't think that Achane is going to be a real workhorse back in the NFL ever. I do like the landing spot too, for the fact that Tua does not run the ball at all, so he will be checking it down to the running back more, and I feel Achane is a pretty good receiving back, garnering 60 receptions in the last 2 seasons of college, which is absolutely fine at the position. While he might not be the running back 1 right away, I'd be hard-pressed to name 3 running backs that I would rather have in Dynasty rookie drafts over him. Obviously Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously Bijan Robinson, but after that, it's really anyone's best gets. That's why I think Achane is my running back 3. Let's move it on just real quick to discuss my last running back, and that is Tank Bigsby. And Tank Bigsby finds himself in a pretty poor situation. I mean, you have Travis Etienne as the number 1 running back. Yes, he is the number 2 running back in this situation, most likely. But what does that really mean? I mean, he pretty much is going to be an insurance back, and at the next level, I'm fine with it, I guess, but not somebody I'm clamoring over. Just wanted to mention his name real quickly because he did go in the 3rd round. Those are all the relevant fantasy players that went in the 2nd and 3rd round. Hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, again, go give this video a like. I'm answering every single comment. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. And subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss another video. With that, though, guys, as always, have a good day, a good night, and a good life.